Alexander Selkirk was just left alone on a deserted island by his captain. He begged, he screamed, he watched the ship disappear anyway. One man, one knife, one musket with 12 rounds of powder, and an island the size of a small city, with no roads, no shelter, and no other human being for 1,518 days. He would face rats the size of his forearm, Spanish soldiers hunting him with loaded muskets, a cliff fall that shattered him against the rocks below. But none of those came closest to ending him. His own mind did. Remember that knife. Remember that Bible. By the time this story ends, both of them will have done something you won't expect. Alexander was born in 1676. Lower Largo, Scotland. Restless, defiant, built for danger the way other men are built for routine. In 1703, he signed onto a privateering expedition, licensed pirates, sailing under the British Crown's blessing to raid Spanish shipping during the War of the Spanish Succession. His captain was Thomas Stradling, and by September 1704, their ship, the Cinque Ports, had stopped at an uninhabited island called Maza Tierra to take on fresh water. Selkirk believed the hull was rotting beneath them. He'd argued it, proved it, begged Stradling to listen. Stradling didn't, and so Selkirk made the kind of decision that only makes sense when you're convinced you're already dead. He demanded to be left behind on the island rather than sail further on what he was certain was a doomed ship. Stradling agreed. The moment the Cinque Ports cleared the bay, reality detonated inside Selkirk's chest. He ran into the surf, he screamed, he begged, but the ship shrank on the horizon, and then it was gone. He was alone, and 4 years of silence had just begun. In exactly 7 minutes, you will see how a feral goat decided the fate of literary history. The first days were the worst. He sat at the shore. He stared at the horizon. He thought about not existing anymore. Then the sea lions came, hundreds of them, each one the weight of 3 grown men. They bellowed and slammed and thrashed across every inch of the shoreline, blocking every path Selkirk had to his food. They forced him inland, into the jungle he'd been terrified to enter. They didn't know they had just saved his life. Here's the biology nobody talks about. Southern sea lions haul out during their mating season. Thousands of animals competing, fighting, and breeding in the same stretch of sand. They don't just occupy the beach, they weaponize it. The ammonia from their waste poisons freshwater pools. Their aggression makes the shoreline lethal to anything that moves on 2 legs. And the noise, a continuous, chest-vibrating roar, is psychologically destabilizing over days and weeks. The beach, every castaway's instinct of safety, is in fact the most hostile environment on the island. The jungle was where survival lived, and Selkirk had just been shoved straight into it. Hidden in the valley beyond the beach, he found wild turnips, cabbage palms, native fruits fat with juice, a clean freshwater stream threading through the volcanic rock, and then the goats, feral animals left behind by pirates decades earlier. Fat, slow, perfectly catchable, once he learned how. The thing that drove him off the beach didn't strand him, it fed him, but the island wasn't done testing him. 4 years of chasing goats barefoot had turned Selkirk's legs into something inhuman. He wasn't just running, he was moving at close to 20 miles per hour across volcanic glass, terrain where any other man would shatter an ankle in the first 10 seconds. The crew that eventually rescued him would watch him hunt and refuse to believe what they were seeing. He wasn't a castaway anymore. He was something the island had forged. He was chasing a goat at full sprint when the ground simply vanished beneath his feet. He fell from a cliff and lay broken on the rocks below for days, barely conscious, unable to call out. The goat he'd been chasing had gone over with him and cushioned the fall. If the goat hadn't been there, this story ends on those rocks. No rescue, no legend, no Robinson Crusoe. And then came the nights. Not fear. Actual teeth. The island's rat population was enormous, disease-ridden. Some were the length of his forearm. At night, they gnawed at his hands and feet as he slept, opening wounds that, in the damp heat, could fester and kill within days. He had no way to stop them, until he found the cats. Wild cats roamed the island. Selkirk tamed them the only way you tame a wild thing, slowly, patiently, with food and stillness. Over weeks, they came closer. Over months, they slept beside him. At night, those fierce hunters drove the rats back from the shelter. In 4 years of silence, the cats were the only warmth he had. By month 6, Selkirk had built something. 2 huts of pimento wood, roofed with grass, lined with goatskin against the cold. A fire that burned warm and fragrant. A small herd of tamed goats for milk and meat. A diet of lobster, wild parsley, watercress, and parsnips. He was, against every conceivable calculation, not just surviving. He was stable. Every night he read his Bible, not purely for faith, to keep language alive, to hear, even in his own mind, what a human voice sounded like. The words were a rope, and he gripped it with both hands. Every morning he climbed his lookout, lit his signal fire, and waited. Every morning, nothing. Then one morning, sails. 2 ships. Heart hammering, Selkirk sprinted to the shore. He screamed. He waved his arms until his shoulders burned. He was ready to be saved. They were Spanish. In 1704, an English privateer captured by the Spanish had one fate: imprisonment, torture, forced labor in the mines of Peru. He turned and ran. He ran faster than he had ever moved on the island, up the trunk of the first tall tree he could find, hands and feet gripping, hauling himself into the canopy. Below him, the Spanish sailors spread across the island, searching, calling to each other. At one moment, a group stopped directly beneath his tree. Their laughter scraped the bark. Their boots ground the roots. One soldier leaned against the trunk. They never looked up. His knife, his Bible, both of them there in that tree with him. The knife he'd carried since the beach, the Bible he'd read every night to stay human. Both of them useless and everything, all at once. Eventually, the sailors gave up. They returned to their ships. The ships sailed away. He watched sails disappear on the horizon, again, just like before, except this time the disappearance was the mercy. Now, the payoff you've been waiting for. Remember the Cinque Ports? The ship Selkirk believed was going to kill everyone aboard? He was right. Not long after abandoning him, the Cinque Ports foundered near Malpelo Island. The hull failed, exactly as Selkirk had predicted. Most of the crew were lost. Captain Stradling and a handful of survivors were captured by the Spanish, imprisoned, and spent years rotting in a cell in Lima. The man who marooned Selkirk ended up imprisoned. The man who was marooned ended up free. Selkirk's humiliation, begging to be taken back, had saved his life twice over. Months dissolved. The silence became its own kind of sound. His clothes disintegrated into threads. He stitched new ones from goat skin, crude and stiff and smelling of the animal. When his knife finally snapped at the handle, he didn't despair. He found a rusted iron barrel washed ashore, hammered it cold against rock, and ground a new blade by hand. His feet had long since toughened to leather on the volcanic rock. His beard grew matted and salt-crusted. He looked less like a man and more like something the island had grown itself. Every morning, the lookout, the signal fire, the horizon, nothing, nothing, nothing. What Selkirk did not know, the man who had once led the voyage that abandoned him was back at sea. William Dampier, the original expedition commander, had launched a new voyage. 2 ships, the Duke and the Duchess. They'd left England in September 1709, and by late January 1710, they were drawing close to a small, uninhabited island in the Pacific. February 1st, 1710. Selkirk saw sails. He studied the rigging through 4 years of trained eyes. British, he ran, he lit his fire, he waved until his arms gave out. Dampier saw the smoke and sent a longboat. When the crew landed, they found a figure who could barely speak. His tongue had lost the groove of language. His voice had forgotten the shape of words. He stood on the beach, goatskin clothes, matted beard, bare leather feet, and stared at them. 4 years, 4 months, 1,518 days of silence. He heard a human voice again. The irony arrived immediately, and it was brutal. The crew that had come to rescue Selkirk were ravaged with scurvy. Weak, disoriented, barely functional. Selkirk, after 4 years of physical conditioning on volcanic terrain, was stronger and faster than any of them. He hunted goats every day to feed them back to health. The man they came to rescue ended up saving the rescuers. Captain Woods Rogers named him the island's governor. Half joke, complete truth. He started his story begging to get back on a ship. He ended it as second mate, then sailing master. He led raids up the Guayas River in Ecuador, helped capture galleons off the coast of Mexico, threaded through the Dutch East Indies. By 1711, 8 years after the whole thing began, he returned to England. He had circled the globe. He started with a Bible that kept language alive inside him. He ended with a story that became the most famous castaway novel ever written. A writer named Daniel Defoe heard the account and channeled it into Robinson Crusoe, a novel that has never gone out of print. He started with a knife he'd carried since the beach. He ended having hammered a new one from rust and rock, because that is what he was by then. In 1966, Chile renamed the island where he had survived Robinson Crusoe Island, and the more remote, uninhabited island to the west, Masafuera, was renamed Alejandro Selkirk Island. The man who begged to be taken back got an island named after him. He'd stared at that horizon for 4 years, waiting for something to happen. In the end, it was his story that crossed it.